Everybody, thank you very much indeed for coming along to tonight's session. This is one in a series of engagement events that's been organised by North Lanarkshire Community Planning Partnership. And one of the benefits and beauties of the new technology is that we can bring people together from across North Lanarkshire for these engagement and consultation events around, we call them big ticket items. It's the development of plans and strategies or new ways of working that apply across North Lanarkshire and aren't particular to one specific area or one particular community board. And that's why it's really good to bring everyone together like this. So tonight's session, hosted by Police Scotland, is looking at the local police plan for North Lanarkshire. And that'll cover the period 23-24 to 26-27. So I'm delighted to say that we've got colleagues from Police Scotland on the call tonight, and we're going to kick off with Superintendent Andy Thompson, and Andy's the partnership superintendent, and he's going to speak about the local police plan. So I'll just hand over to you, Andy. If anyone has any questions, can I ask you please to put them in the chat bar, and I'll just keep an eye on them to make sure that Andy doesn't miss anybody. Okay, thanks very much indeed, folks.
Thanks very much, Jennifer, and really good evening to you all. I'm very happy to be here. So, as Jennifer said, I'm Andy Thompson. I'm a partnership superintendent based in Motherwell, and tonight I'm joined on the call by two of our area commanders representing Wishaw, Shotts, Motherwell and Bells Hill is Lex Bailey. He's on the call tonight. Lex took over recently from Gillian Norrie, but he's been in the division for quite some time. And then for Coatbridge, Airdrie, Northern Corridor, Kilsyth and Cumbernauld, we have Graham McLaughlin. Ross McCallum is the regular area commander for that area, Coatbridge and Airdrie, and up to Cumbernauld. However, he's actually on leave, so Graham is covering his post for a few weeks before taking on the role as area commander over in Hamilton and Clydesdale. So what we thought we'd do is, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through a wee presentation with you now to talk about the local police plan, our own thoughts on it, and then we'll invite some questions from you. Okay, folks, this is the part where you have to tell me if my screen is being shared.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's just start on that then. Right, okay, so we've got them. We want to introduce, as Jennifer says, our local policing plan for the next 3 years. Format for this evening. We've, so we've done the welcome, we've done the introduction. We'll then talk a little bit about local police plan, the background to our concerns, the contacts within which we operate. And then it's very much over to you to ask any questions you feel. And then from that, we'll talk about what the next steps are based on, this is part of a wider consultation. And then we'll close it off. So we're anticipating we'll not be here past 8 o'clock. So the plan on a page, this one is the Police Scotland one. So Police Scotland, when the 2012 Act came out, which created Police Scotland on the 1st of April 2013, it was written into legislation that Chief Constable must produce an annual police plan. And you can see on there that this is the top ticket items. So we talk about our vision, what we want to do, the purpose of policing, that's really important as well. So the purpose of policing is to improve the safety and well-being of people, places and communities across Scotland. We've then got our values, which are again set in legislation, which is unique to policing in the UK. And then we have the strategic police priorities. There are 6 of those, and they are done by the Scottish ministers. And then from that, the Scottish Police Authority and Police Scotland determine what the priorities are for policing for the year. And this is the most recent plan for this year, just obviously 1st of April to the 31st of March. We're halfway through it. And our 4 priorities are protecting vulnerable people, tackling crime in the digital age, working with our communities, and support for operational policing. From that, there are 5 outcomes and a variety of objectives. I can, of course, send this to you rather than going through them all, but the key things to take away from this, I suppose, are that it is a broad brush, but it does have certain priorities in it. And then once this has been completed, that goes out once a year. It goes through the Scottish Police Authority, and that's a publicly available document which you can download online. And then there's 13 local police divisions in Scotland, each of which then have to work within the confines of that plan, but put a local slant on it. So every 3 years, we have to produce, again through legislation, our own police plan. That then goes through a consultation period, which this is part of, and then a draft plan. We get all the different consultees, we take notes from it all, think about your priorities, then we get all the bits and pieces together, we look at an analysis piece of work, see what the common themes are, and then write a plan. That plan has to go before both the North and South Lanarkshire scrutiny boards for approval. It cannot come in, we cannot work on that until it's properly signed off by our scrutiny boards, which is again really important, and it shows the scrutiny and governance and accountability at a local level. So in Lanarkshire then, what do we have? So this is our senior management team in Lanarkshire. At the top of the tree, we have Alan Waddle, our chief superintendent. Underneath him, we have 4 superintendents. I'm obviously on there. Then we have Alison Higgins, who's responsible for our people in development, HR, fleet, finance, all the sort of enablers that make us work, or make our people work properly. Raymond Higgins has operations, and Julie Henry has CID. Sitting underneath them, we have 5 uniform and 3 CID chief inspectors. So Stevie McGovern over in East Kilbride, and Cambus Lang and Rutherglen. Tony Gallagher, soon to be replaced by Graham, who's on the call, covering Hamilton and Clydesdale. Lex we've spoken about, and Ross, you know, because Graham's in for him today. The other ones you may or may not be familiar with Bryony Day, who's got a pan-Lanarkshire responsibility for service delivery. Susie Cairns has our CID, and then Marty McGee and Becky Gregson are responsible for the Public Protection Unit, which comprises of a variety of different things, from rape investigation, domestic abuse, adult support and protection, offender management. Is quite a wide remit, and it's really, really high risk, that sort of stuff. So in terms of people, those are the personalities, and sitting underneath that, this is our resources in total, our police officer numbers. Again, these are publicly available every quarter. They're put on the Police Scotland website. This is our most recent quarter. So we have 1,333 police officers in Lanarkshire Division. Moving up a level, we've also got access to regional resources. Again, sort of almost 1,400 regional resources. That could include our major investigation team, who deal a lot with, the east one is actually based in Coatbridge. So if we've got particularly complex murder inquiries, then they would take those on. We've also got public order and firearms assets at a regional level, and then almost 1,800 national resources, which could be the National Rape Investigation Unit, Domestic Abuse Unit at national level, real specialists in their field, from counter-terrorism to air support to the mounted and to our dog branch. When we've only done one of these 3-year plans. So when it came out, it was the very first one was 2021, and it expires on the 31st of March. That was what we had, and you'll notice that from the original item that I showed you earlier on, the annual police plan, the strategic outcomes are the same, but what are our areas of focus and what are the local policing priorities currently, the things that the community wanted us to focus on, which were reducing violence and disorder, public protection and protecting people at risk of harm, tackling housebreaking and other acquisitive crime, and then reducing the harm caused by substance misuse. Then we split them down to areas of focus, and they must fit into the strategic outcomes. We can localise the first 2 columns completely to our discretion, as long as we can get them within the parameters within which policing works in Scotland. But one thing that strikes me about this one is that in its early days, it was really focused on crime. And we'll come on in a wee minute to the changing demand of policing, because it's not just crime. So moving on to the context within which we presently operate in 2022. So the first one, oh, sorry, something has disappeared on my screen. The first element of this is financial contraction. So firstly, can you see that screen? Because I'm getting a different view from what it should be. Is it okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, we can see
Yeah,
it.
it's fine. Yeah, I'm getting a different view on my screen, so it must be a wee IT glitch at my end. So the first one, financial contraction. You'll have seen in the papers recently, and you'll be well aware of the contraction across the public sector. The easiest way to say that, I suppose, when the spending review was recently came out, they were quite clear. Justice takes quite a big hit. It's going to be now a spending review is not a budget. I should be clear on that. If the spending review manifests into a budget with 80% of police resource being spent on wages and pensions, that doesn't leave a lot. If it's going to be a flat amount that we are given against an inflation rate currently over 10% and expected to climb, that is going to prove incredibly difficult to provide the service going forward that we provide today. I can't make that any clearer. Then we move on to the demand for policing services. So the demand for policing services, to put this into context, Lanarkshire Division takes 170,000 calls for our assistance each year. So that equates to about 460 a day. That is a phenomenal amount for 1,333 people to be dealing with. The changing nature of it, of the context within which we operate. Some of you might have heard this before, but when I was a young cop, most of the things I dealt with were either crime or disorder or incidents. Now young cops, when they're coming onto the shift, they're predominantly dealing with vulnerability, with mental health. And we can talk about the cost of living crisis and the impact that's going to have on policing. We're already seeing rises in areas such as shoplifting and housebreaking. That's to be expected. As we move out of the pandemic, learn to live with the coronavirus, we certainly see a change as well. We're seeing a change in generally more challenge to the police, more protest. We can see that rise. We see entirely legitimate protest, that if you put a lot of people in one place at one time, policing has to be there for public safety. And if they're there, then they're not elsewhere. And then in terms of vulnerability, we have to take care of people, we have to get them to hospital. The impact of displaced demand, where our hard-worked colleagues in the NHS, really hard worked, really strapped, but any delays in their system puts a delay on policing. But one thing we do have in our favour in Lanarkshire is you've got an outstanding workforce. I worked here before, went away international role for 4 years and came back, and I was delighted to see that the attitude, the diligence, the hard work is still there. It is really quite remarkable what these young cops do. Frequently without a break, 10, 12-hour shifts. They're on it all the time. And that's why you've got a reduction in crime across every group of crime. It's presently down, in the most recent figures, is down 6%, which, given the complexities within the context we're working in, is really is quite remarkable, and it's testament to them. Now, a question that we've got to ask ourselves as part of the senior management team, for myself, Lex, and Graham, is how we then tackle the plan, because it's not just about addressing crime. We've got to work out a way within this context of doing three things. The first thing is how do we develop our officers and staff to make them better, to provide them with the capacity to deal with things? How do we then build a cohesive, inspired and enthusiastic team? And how do we deliver the task, or our purpose? You know, making things better for the people and communities that are within Lanarkshire. How do we go about that? And that's why we need your assistance tonight to come forward and give us some ideas about how we can move forward. Our next part, sorry, I'm having issues again. So this really is this is over to you now. I'm going to stop sharing this screen. And then what I would like you to do is start talking to us, Graham, Lex and I, and start thinking about what do you want? We've got a finite amount of resources. It's like a finite budget. It's like a finite anything. You've only got so many people. Where do you see our focus should be over the next 3 years? It's not an easy question, but it's certainly one I am dying to hear your thoughts on. So I'll stop sharing this screen and come back to it in a wee bit. And then, you know, any questions you've got, Lex, Graham, and I, ably assisted by Jennifer, of course, will assist in any way we can. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andy. Can I ask then if anyone's got any questions just to Willie, you're coming in, Willie Goldie?
Yes, it's just, you know, obviously one of the local councillors at Cumbernauld South of that. I think the community co-ops just now are doing an excellent job. One thing that has actually come up over the last wee while is that a couple of years back there, the council ward boundaries changed. For example, Ward 3 in Cumbernauld lost the Seafar end. But I think the police community guys are still working on the old ward boundaries. And it was just to see if thoughts could be given to that. I don't know if we're unique in North Lanarkshire or that's the only place that's happened, but it's just on your community policing. If you could look at that, it might make it easier for your guys, and it certainly make it easier for communication with community councils and whatever.
You know, that's Graham, you get any observations as area commander for up there?
No, what I'll do is certainly that's kind of news to me. I'm covering it at the moment, but I'll go back, Willie, I'll take a look at that, and what I'll do is I'll raise it to Ross, who comes back next week, just to make sure he's aware, and we will take a look at that. As you say, might very well work in everybody's favour going forward.
Bill, is that you looking to come in with a question?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jennifer. Lots and lots of questions, but but I think one of the very important issues, and we've discussed it locally here with the local inspector and the local cops, is the police's public image. Now, if I take the fire service, if there's a gala day or an event locally or that kind of thing, you get the fire service coming along and they chat to the kids, they chat to adults. They try to get a retained service, locals to take on the role of retained service. But one of the things that the police doesn't do nowadays, they used to decades ago, they would do that kind of communication with the general public. The general public as a whole sees the police as an adversary. They look at the police and they're to a certain extent, they're scared of the police, because they're scared that if they say something wrong or do something, that everybody makes mistakes. But if they do something wrong, chatting to a policeman or driving, you see it yourself, you drive past a police car or a police car's on the road and everybody, suddenly, the police car's doing 60 mile an hour going up the motorway and everybody puts their lights on and brakes because they don't want to pass the police car in case they break the speed limit and get pulled over. So, but it's getting the kids, the teenagers and the young kids to understand that the police are their friends. They're there to help people, not to arrest them and lock them up. So I think there's a public image that we need to look at with how the police deal with the general public.
No, I think, sorry, what area are you from, Bill? Sorry, forgive me.
Oh, sorry, I'm from Kilsyth.
Kilsyth. Yeah, I think you make some interesting points in there. I think visibility is the one for me, probably more so than than perception, because if you get visibility and you get engagement, perception changes. It's the first time I've heard actually that people are frightened to engage with the police, because certainly when we're out and about, we can't keep people away from one thing and another. But it is interesting, because of the calls, when I was talking earlier on about 460 on average per day, it's fascinating to know that less than 1 in 5 is actually related to, or actually results in a crime report being raised. And this demand that's displaced, because we see so much time in police officers' lives now are spent going call to call to call. That free time is being squeezed out. Now, whilst I would like to send police officers to every gala day and every event that I possibly could, at the moment there's so many police officers struggling to get something to eat at work because of the demand placed upon them. Then I have to sort of balance that. But yeah, absolutely, I do take your point. If we can get to the demand levels we were at previously, and maybe readdress or redress the balance back to what everyone on this call would consider traditional policing work, then it will free up more time. But that in itself is a challenge across the entire public sector, where we're all trying to help each other out, and that's the essence of partnership. But I do take your point, Bill, and I thank you for it.
Yeah, I would agree with what you've said there. Locally here, and I presume it's the same elsewhere, I in my position in the community, I'll say to somebody, "Did you report that incident to the police?" No. Why? Because the police will not do anything about it. So I'm not going to waste my time. So there's that type of image that we need to get across to the general public. But yeah, I agree 100%. You don't have the resources. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a huge amount in there for communication.
Yes.
You know, like we said earlier on, the only crime that's gone up fractionally, if I compare 2020 to 2021 versus 21 to 22 as calendar years, the only crime in North Lanarkshire that's gone up by group is probably violent crime, non-sexual violent crime, and it's gone up a fraction. Everything else has actually pretty much come down. So it's interesting that the perception versus reality there, really interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Bill. Can I bring in Councillor Leckie and then Gary and Laura?
Oh, good evening, Councillor Leckie for Tissot Ward, Ward 13. The thing that we have up here in our area is the community policing. They just seem to get in the door and then start going out about, showing themselves, getting the confidence of the people. And help my Bob, 2 weeks later, they're taken away and then another crowd comes in where they don't get the present. I feel the community police that are coming in are not getting a chance to go round the ward, getting their feet under the table, getting to know everybody. And then they're no sooner in till they're moved on again, which can't be good for policing if they keep changing on a high turnover like that.
Yeah, I'll answer it a little bit in terms of the sort of context of that. Then I'll hand you over to Lex for the specifics. I think you make an interesting point. I think policing has a challenge at the moment about getting people in the door as people are retiring, and it's 3 things that have converged at the same time. So there was a suspension on training, rightly, for both COP26 and for the coronavirus. So that meant we were running, you can't get people through the training aspect of it. And then you've got old duffers like me and Lex who can retire, and many are electing to do so with the changes to pension legislation. So if you have those elements, then sometimes you have to reshuffle the pack. If you have younger, newer people, less experience in one place, and you find out, that the experienced ones are leaving, and then the new ones aren't coming as quickly as you would like, then those that are just outside that probation probably still need a helping hand. So then you move the more experienced cops over to assist with that. But I do absolutely take your point. I was a community police officer many years ago. I was a community police sergeant. The benefits to having consistency in a community is fantastic. Lex, what's your thoughts?
I agree with you entirely in respect to that, sir. It's just consistency is everything, accountability and a bit of ownership for their areas. And John, you're absolutely right. That's the biggest thing for community policing, is to have a bit of ownership, and having been a community police officer myself, it's the best job in the police. There's no two ways about it. So I've only been here a very short period of time, but my intention would be for my community police officers to be consistent and to give you that consistency right across the communities. And I'll look at Fertisset and see what's happening up there, just to make sure that we get that consistency, and you know who you're looking for and who to contact when there's something going on.
Is that okay, Councillor Leckie?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Gary Robinson.
Thank you very much. Andy, thanks very much for your presentation there. I'm councillor for Coatbridge West. Now, I think we covered this the last time we spoke, Andy, as well. And obviously you've mentioned it already tonight about the fact that, you know, the Police Scotland are being pulled in all sorts of directions and being asked to do a significant amount of things that weren't, you know, traditionally within your remit, especially, you know, for instance, with the pressure on the ambulance services as well. Are you noticing any difference in terms of being pulled, you know, as we kind of move out of the pandemic into these other areas, or are these pressures just the same as always?
No, I think, I mean, you probably hit the nail on the head. It's displaced demand, and I would stress this isn't the fault of our ambulance or NHS colleagues. It really isn't. It's if they're at capacity, and what we're finding is we were always the service of last resort. That we understand. We will always step in where there is a gap in service, but that's becoming more frequent, simply because if somebody falls over in a street and bangs their head, you would automatically think that's nothing to do with the police, really. But police will never turn a blind eye to that if we're driving past. But what we're finding is frequently the public will phone the police because they know of the acute pressures on the ambulance service, or they have phoned the ambulance service and there's a delay in getting there, and they are rightly concerned about the safety and well-being of their loved one. But to go back to the substantive point, I think that the pressure on policing through that displaced demand across the public sector it's certainly as acute as it ever has been. It hasn't waned as yet.
Fine. And I mean, I think that's going to have a serious impact on the community police plan for the next few years, because whatever great things we're hoping to achieve, as long as that displaced demand, as you're calling it, is still there and potentially going to grow, as you know, pressures on other public sector bodies increase, then I just wonder what the impact and how serious that's going to be on the police plan, whatever plan we try and put in place here. So I think it's imperative that everybody that works in the public sector at the moment thinks about this and thinks about how we can mitigate that displaced demand as much as possible for you.
Yeah, no, and thank you, and any support from yourself or your elected rep colleagues in that regard would be most welcome. I do think it is that whole system approach that's probably needed. It is, and there'll be elements that we can't attend because we're covering for somebody else, meaning somebody else is dragged into our world a little bit as well. So there is that domino effect across the public sector. But hopefully we'll get to a point where living with the coronavirus just becomes part and parcel of life, and in hopefully weeks and months down the line rather than years, we get ourselves all back to a position across the public sector where we're all back in what we traditional roles, and where we help each other out. That's a good thing to do.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Councillor. Laura, I know you've put a comment in the chat bar about some work that police have been doing locally with young people through the community boards. Do you want to elaborate on that any, or come in?
Yeah, so just when you were talking about the relationship that the police have with young people, it was just kind of to reinforce that work is taking place. So I work with care experienced young people as part of the Champions Board, and the police have been engaging with them to build relationships and remove that fear factor. But also, you know, we've got 5 children's houses across North Lanarkshire with care experienced young people, and the police are working there to build a relationship with the young people that are living in the houses. I actually had a group of young people at a police station last week as part of their summer programme. So it was just to, you know, to say that that work is taking place. You know, COVID did have an impact on it, but it is happening. So yeah, it was just to say thanks.
Thanks, Laura. And I think that sort of demonstrates in practice what Bill was saying at the start about just building that relationship and that trust between local communities, young people and the police. Alec, you had your hand up and you've put it down. Do you want to come in?
So I'd like to come in on, I was just putting some stuff on the chat line, so it'll save me doing this. The point I would make, first of all, is an opinion point more than anything else. The police lost a lot of credence when they moved from a police force and called themselves a police service. The police were all, when they were a force, they were all over the place. You saw them, they were in the streets and everything. Then they moved to a police service, which meant that there was a lot more calling. They were always seemed to be very jealous of the fire service and the ambulance service because they were never there until they were called. So a lot of credence seemed to have been lost as we moved towards this new service element, instead of being a force which actually enforced things, and they weren't just dealing with things of complaints. The police do not go around the streets looking for things that are wrong. The second thing is what you were saying, Andy. Your resources are insufficient. And that should be highlighted through councils to the Scottish Government. There's a war chest there. Let's use that war chest for more police on the ground, because just as everybody has said, you are the last resort for the public when they can't get ambulances, when they can't get everybody else. And that's an excellent place for you to be. But you need to have the people to do it. If there's a big thing going on in Glasgow, the criminal element can run riot in Lanarkshire, because not only Lanarkshire, but everywhere else, everything's sucked into Glasgow. Glasgow should stand alone. The second thing is there is a requirement in the public sector and in the services of fire, police and ambulance for big tent thinking. And it's required by the Scottish Government in order to properly provide those services. Not let kid on or anything like that. Put the resources in these services, because that's what people require.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your comments and indeed your support. It is fascinating the difference. And I remember there was a study done many years ago about force fee service, you know, and it is interesting. But I think those days are long gone. Even in our legacy arrangements, it was Strathclyde Police. It was never Strathclyde Police Force or Strathclyde Police Service. It was always, you know, and we sort of moved with the times, with moving from the essence of force and enforcement to the wider service provision about protection and prevention that we see in modern policing. I think, you know, in terms of visibility, I suppose the front line has moved in terms of where crime is committed, and the complexity of crime has certainly changed. So in days gone by, certainly when I was a young cop, you know, there was a lot of violence on the street. You know, things happened in public places. You know, we didn't have phones and everything now. And pretty much every crime now, almost, or certainly the very high percentage of them, has a digital footprint. So somebody's got to be away dealing with that. And you know, if we think about all the different offences, the online stuff, you know, the front line can be somebody's bedroom, where they could, you know, from you know, abusive images to being bullied online to the horrors that could be radicalisation and terrorism. It's, you know, policing has to be in those spaces, and it has to be police officers that do that. And of course, the impact of that is if you've only got a set amount of police officers and they're performing all these tasks, because crime, the profile of crime has changed, then you are likely to see less of them. Fortunately, we've moved recently to having every officer in Lanarkshire's now got a mobile device. So see, when you see them out and about, they're actually not messing about on their phones, like you would see. They're actually using they are mobile phones, but they have apps on them. So police officers can now, you know, like, rather than whip out the notebook and write down a statement, they can type it straight on, and that interfaces with our computer system and gets uploaded. So it actually makes them more productive in the sense that they spend more time in the community. And all right, they might be in the community, sitting in a community hub, typing out statements and whatnot, but at least they're in the community. They're in those places where people can call on. They'll get a faster response than in my day, where you had to come back to the office and spend hours typing stuff up. So yeah, no, really good points you've made there.
One other observation I would make is that if I was a police constable today, or a police officer, let's call the proper term, I would be very demoted. I run all over trying to catch people. I catch them, I arrest them, I put them in court, they're found guilty, they get a slap on the wrist, and they're out there doing the business tomorrow. A lot of this has got to do with the way that the justice system in Scotland has got soft. And a lot of that is by, I would think, solicitors looking at one simple thing. You've got to keep the bad guy out of prison. Because if my client as a lawyer is in prison, I'm losing revenue. I've got to make the laws so soft so that he's always out there giving me revenue. And that's just an opinion that you may well want to put in the back of your mind.
Yeah, it's motivation for police is of course something, that was the point I was making earlier on. How do we develop our people? How do we make them more mentally resilient? How do we make them better? Which is for any employer, for any supervisor there is out there in any walk of life. You've got to train your people and get the very best from them. It's the only way you can do so. And whilst there will be cases out there that maybe had sentences that perhaps didn't tally with the crime for which they were committed, that's the independence of the fiscal service and the Scottish judiciary that we couldn't possibly get involved in. That's sacrosanct.
Thanks, Andy. And you did say it in the upshot that the workforce was your greatest asset, and you referred to an outstanding staff team across Police Scotland, particularly here in North Lanarkshire and Q Division. Picking up on what we were saying about that enforcement role of the police compared to the community role, Sharon had put a comment in the chat bar around during COVID and lockdown, the enforcement role was potentially heightened. And now, as we're coming out of the pandemic and services are picking up again and normal life is picking up again insofar as it can, Sharon was saying that she's noticed in her work in Bellshill there has been a greater involvement from the police in community events and engaging with local people. Sharon, do you want to come in on that?
Aye. It was just to sort of say, it was what Bill had been sort of referring to at the start there about the whole the image, and I suppose that most of us just go about our day-to-day business, and we don't have to really think about the police. We're never involved. We don't create crimes and all that kind of stuff. So it's most of the time you don't see them. But I think the pandemic situation really did put the fear of death into a lot of people in more ways than one. And I think there was a lot more fear instilled in people, and the police obviously were there to enforce and all the rest of it. So I can see obviously recently that it is changing, and it feels like we're kind of getting back to normal. So I suppose with the recent meetings, events that I've been at in Belsill, and obviously the police were there at the fire services event in Motherwell on Saturday as well, which was really good. So I guess it's just, we need more of that. We definitely need more of that, and I think it's getting into the schools a lot more, because obviously the schools, there was restrictions with schools as well. So I do think that we're kind of moving back into that level of normality, that kind of thing's happening, and it will improve the image of the police. I think you've just got to stay on the right side of them.
I'm just looking for something just now in my drawer, because you've reminded me of something to do with the schools. So we are presently in 12 schools in North Lanarkshire, which is a good thing. And we've been working with the council, and recently I was working with Janie and Tim at the council in the education department to work out, are we at the right schools, and doing a bit of analysis around about that to make sure that's current, because you shouldn't just be in one school and just sit there forever. You've got, there's a lot of schools in North Lanarkshire that we could get across, because they also take to do with the feeder schools as well, and that particularly vulnerable time when people transition from primary 7 on. And that works quite, it is quite intense. Clearly we weren't there, and we put the campus cops back on the front line when the schools closed down, clearly. But on the wider point, I think you are right in what you say. You've seen the police a lot more out in the communities, and that's where the police officers want to be during the pandemic, and because that's why you exist. Your preventative duty is in many ways primacy. It has primacy over investigation, because if you can prevent the crime, you don't have to investigate it. So that is where police officers want to be. But we did, throughout the pandemic, adopt a 4-phase approach to things. So it was very much explain. You would engage with somebody, then you would explain the situation to them, then you would encourage them in the first instance, and not to continue doing what they're doing, and then only where necessary you moved into that enforcement phase. But there were more people out and about during the pandemic. There's no denying that in terms of policing, and you did see a lot more of them, particularly with those who were able to work from home. Would have seen a lot more of them in the community. There's hands going up all over here, Jennifer. What's going on? What have I done?
Well, Lex wants to come in on the back of what you've said, and then Councillor Leckie.
Thanks, Jennifer. I just wanted to say, just to add to what the Superintendent Thompson was saying, just about the role of our officers and how outstanding our officers are. However, we do have officers with 2 and 3 years service who are still developing and have lost a bit of development because of the pandemic. When pubs were closed, they weren't used to going and dealing with people in pubs, and they now are having to do that. All of a sudden, it's just opened up again. Football matches, similarly, we've got Premier League teams now coming back to Motherwell, and football's back on again. And cops haven't worked at football matches for such a long time. We weren't in hospitals. We were dropping people off at hospitals during the pandemic because we weren't allowed in because of COVID. And now we're sitting with 6 and 7 hours with people at hospitals that we didn't do previously. So that it is a changing role for the frontline officers, and it has to develop. And a lot of that is because of, even there's more traffic on the roads now than there was during the pandemic. If you cast your mind back 2 years, the roads were really quiet and really empty. So now we're having to deal with more road accidents. We're dealing with more crashes, and subsequently, obviously more drivers being coming to our attention for various reasons. So yeah, we do understand that we are developing, and it's down to our supervisors now who are taking that role forward to make sure these officers are as good as they possibly can be.
It's those things that you don't think of, those very real hands-on learning on the job experiences, Lex, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and we've lost that. You can try and explain what it's like when you're faced with 3,000 people in a football stadium who are all baying for the blood of the referee or the opposing team or the fans. But standing there in front of them is a different kettle of fish.
Absolutely. Councillor Leckie.
Hi, hello there. The thing that we started, Susan Rooney was a community police officer in Shotts. She started the Youth Police volunteer group, and it was a fantastic success. And that again, that goes back to my first question when I said to you, when the community got to know Susan and what she was all about, the group started to flourish and is still going great today. But and also with the police going back to the schools and going to campus and listening to the children, that it's not the children that's going to school. My worry is it's the children who don't go to school who's causing all the antisocial behaviour, going and causing disruption and causing vandalism all over the shop during the day. That's something we need to address, I think.
I've got, yeah, so Police Scotland Youth Volunteers is something quite close to my heart, because I worked with Susan on this many years ago when it first began in Cumbernauld. The very first group was in Cumbernauld, then it expanded to Hamilton and over to Shotts. Really, really worthwhile. It's small groups of people, and they are great because, I tell you, some of those people would have come to our attention in other ways had it not been for that youth development. And you know, we're talking earlier on about involvement with youth. I know, because it's actually heartbreaking to think about one of the groups. One of our community officers had to buy a couple of people pairs of shoes at his own pocket because they didn't have black shoes to wear for their pass out parade, for their wee bit of drill they do and whatnot in front of their friends and family. Another one had to arrange maths lessons for them. So that's the sort of stuff that all of that takes time, it takes effort, it takes a huge amount of work, and it's maybe not as visible as normal. But yeah, Police Scotland Youth Volunteers, an absolutely great thing. Great to see it continue to go. And Susan, who's now left us, was a fine ambassador for that work.
That's certainly something we can look at in the other areas. Andy, thank you. Billy.
Hi, Jennifer. Long time since I've spoke to you. Hi, Andy.
Hello.
I'd just like to carry on from what was said about the PSYV. Andy knows I'm very heavily involved in that in Cumbernauld, and with everything else that the police do in Cumbernauld. The crime prevention panel are involved in it. You know, we are doing projects at the moment along with Susan Ray, the inspector in Cumbernauld. I just found out today, Andy, she's on holiday. I went in to see her, but she was away. It's just we've that many projects with the crime stoppers at the moment. You know, also, as you know, we have the bike marking programme as well, which we're waiting to get into every school in the northern area, primary schools. So that is the way we work along with the police, and the community work along with the police. And the PSYV, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the best things that ever took place within the youth groups. We have a great turnout in Cumbernauld, and I hope it carries on for the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Billy. I didn't see you up in the corner there. I
was hiding, Andy, my usual.
Your comments are very, very welcome, and I can't thank you enough for all the work you do with our young people up there, and your support for the group, and indeed your wider support for policing in the Cumbernauld area.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Billy. Folks, we've probably got around half an hour left. I'm thinking of the plan on a page that Andy put up on the screen at the start of the session tonight, and also the development of the local police plan for Lanarkshire, and in particular our area, North Lanarkshire, at the start of the meeting. And we've got the 6 strategic objectives that are set nationally by Police Scotland. And in the current local police plan, there were 4 priorities for Lanarkshire around tackling violent crime, around developing community policing, but also recognising the changing face and nature of crime. And if we think about cybercrime, and if we think about some of the sort of activity that happens kind of undercover and isn't in our face as maybe a robbery or an assault was years ago. Do you want to have a think about whether those 6 strategic priorities and the 4 priorities that are in the current plan are still relevant, or do they need to be revisited in the local area? And I don't know, Andy, if it would be able to put that particular slide up again.
I'm sure I can. I don't know what's going on with my computer, because when I'm wheeling through stuff, it seems to disappear. But I shall try and get it back on.
Okay, just while you're doing that, if people can have a think about, what matters most to you in your local area. I think we have heard a lot around the importance of community policing, the importance of the police being visible, the importance of the police working with the communities. So Billy had his hand up, and then Bill. Go to Billy first while Andy's getting that slide. I think you're on mute, Billy.
I've disappeared. I don't know what's happened. Oh, no, it's me. I forgot to take my hand down. Sorry, Jennifer.
All right, that was a legacy.
Usually it's this old age, Jennifer.
Doesn't come easy, does it?
No.
The other Bill Craig, did you have another comment just before we have a look at the priorities?
Well, no, that's what I wanted to speak about, is the priorities. What we've spoken about so far is generalities and ideas and stuff like that, and how it affects us. But the plan, I can only speak based on our knowledge of Cocythe and the villages, and having regular meetings with the police, etc. In the Cocythe area, I would say that the highest priority is not so much violent crime in the way of knives and shooting and gang fights and stuff like that. The thing that people look for from the police is to deal with what I would say, and maybe the police would say as well, minor disturbance in the community. And if that and a lot of that minor disturbance by not just teenage children, but by young adults, sometimes older adults, unfortunately. But a lot of these incidents are fueled by alcohol and drugs. And to achieve a quieter community element, then the drugs and the alcohol would need to get under control. How we deal with that on the drugs, I don't know, because if somebody comes to the community council, of which I'm the chair, like last night, there was an individual at the community council, and they said, to the police, Martin and another young man was at the community council, and she says to them, but drugs are rife up my way. And I was saying to her, I said, well, you have to report it. The police can't read your minds. You need to report. And all that had been reported in Cocythe in the last month was 4 incidents, drug-related incidents. And that's because people will not report. They're more frightened of the drug dealers than they are of the police. So I would say that when in your current plan it says antisocial behaviour, but that local disturbances fueled by drugs and alcohol are the main things. And through the community policing, if the community policing I think, are the most important police in Police Scotland, or in any police force, because if we are dealing with primary school children, we're communicating with them up through secondary school, most of these people will learn the right way to live, and they won't become hardened criminals. It may be that if we've got 10 kids causing problems in Kilsyth, they're re-educated, that 3 of them or 2 of them will become, the police will pick them up in 40 years' time because they're still hardened criminals. But we can deal with the community policing. The way that they've been doing it in Kilsyth has been brilliant. We're re-educating some of the young kids. So that's what I would say that the main priority from Kilsyth is. It might not be in Motherwell or Airdrie or Coatbridge. It might be violent crime, or that might be the main issues. Yes. Hope that helps.
It does, and it is helpful to get that sort of localised perspective, Bill. So from that, I'm taking that your priority, if you were the king of Kilsyth, then you would want alcohol, drugs, antisocial behaviour resolved. That's the 3 things that jump out to me from your comments. But as you rightly say, we have to do a Lanarkshire plan that goes from right the way down past Biggar, right the way up past Cumbernauld. So, whilst the consultation, but you'll find that most people will say the same thing. They'll just add different elements into it. Other areas might well say, we've got a real problem with housebreaking.
Yes. I know your problem there. Yes.
Aye. So no, it's really, so I suppose my question to you as a group is if you had 3, 4, 5 things you wanted the police to focus on above all else, what would they be? Now you can either put them in the chat or shout them out or whatever. That's where we're at. We need to look at that.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Bill. Richard Sullivan, did you have your hand up? Do you want
I did. Yeah, I have. Thanks. Richard Sullivan, one of the councillors for the Airdrie North Ward. Some of the issues we have in the more sort of rural, semi-rural areas surrounds road incidents, and also on cycle paths and footpaths. For example, where there's a lot of speeding up at Longrig End. I've seen it for myself. I was almost involved in an accident, as well as constituents contacting me right the way up to Long Green Gears. And again, that comes to visibility, being out and about, because a lot of people are using that as a rat run. And the other issue is, and it's been reported, and I've spoken to your colleagues when there's been issues on the cycle paths, is that there are horses on it which are causing some disturbance, but more the quad bikes and smaller motorbikes. And the advice was that there couldn't be much done about that because of the public safety concerns of pursuing these vehicles. Are there any plans to work with the local authority either on a speeding campaign in terms of the roads? And is there any dialogue with the local authority in putting up stiles or fences of some kind along the cycle paths if the pursuit of these vehicles are too dangerous? Thank you.
I don't know about the stiles. That would probably be something that would be taken through a road safety group in North Lanarkshire, I would think. I don't know about the stiles. Certainly, North Lanarkshire definitely plays its part in the promotion of communication runabout, that sort of activity, and joint work runabout. Safety initiatives that we have with our road policing colleagues downstairs, and Michael McCusker, one of the cops here, is the road policing local authority liaison officer. He is all about traffic management, and he comes in on that. But certainly for Lex and then for Graham, because I know you've both been involved in the quad bike and the of two-wheelers, because you're right in what you say, councillor. We can't pursue people if they're on a motorbike. The dangers are phenomenal, both to them and our own riders. So we would never never do that. However, you get good video footage, you'll find out who it is. There's plenty of ways to skin a cat. Graham, Lex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you on that in terms of the quad bikers, etc. As soon as we see somebody on a quad bike or on a scrambler bike or off-road bike and they're not wearing a helmet, it's too dangerous for us to pursue them in case they come off. It's just too risky because they start taking risks that aren't worth the result, the consequences, as it were. In terms of the road policing out there, Jay, Councillor Sullivan, it's not an uncommon complaint or an issue in local areas, particularly rural areas, with time on education. But again, like you say, like has been said previously already, if we don't know about it, if we don't know it's an issue, then it's very difficult to address it. So we need to, and that's why Superintendent Thompson arranges for the surgeries with yourselves to make sure that we are picking these things up and picking them up regularly and acting on them as soon as we hear about it.
And it's a common theme as well there. You know, I'm looking down this list, which I've hoped I've shared with you, because again, I can't tell if I'm sharing it or not. But, you know, one of the priorities there, one of the outcomes in the end is interesting. And it goes back to what we were talking about, because an awful lot of you have said visibility. And we've said, well, that's because we, you know, much as we want to, sometimes we can't do as much in that area as we can. But, you know, Lanarkshire's communities and partners are engaged, involved, and have confidence in policing. And that's working with the communities. That goes back to the heart of comments that were made, whether it's our emergency response colleagues who are very much like the ambulance service, or whether it's, you know, our community cops, very much like a GP surgery, to use the health analogy. You know, that's really important. So it's important that you've all highlighted, or many of you have, visibility, which means to me accessibility as well, and engagement. So I shall certainly make a note of them in addition to. So what are we talking about then? What other things would you like us to look at? Just shout at me. I'm used to it. I work with Lex and Graham.
Stony silence there, Andy.
Just something that's Willie Goldie. Just something that's become fairly prevalent over the last wee while is the likes of cybercrime and cold calling and whatever, which I know is very, very difficult to get a hold of. How does that lie? Do the local police, is there a national kind of approach to that? Because certainly I know that certainly within older people within the community, they get quite concerned about it. And it's very, very difficult to deal with. And it's just to see if there is a way the police could approach that. And it's also got the other kind of social media aspect of it as well. And I know that Facebook, Twitter, and God knows what else aren't particularly cooperative in that line. It's to see if there's any way that there could be something that the police could envisage as a positive development in the future.
Yeah, certainly there's a huge amount of effort going into that online space now. And it is difficult. There's no denying that, because the ability to set up anonymous accounts and work from there is a challenge. And you know, the technology that some criminal gangs are using, you know, law enforcement, for want of a better expression, because I don't like law enforcement when I'm talking about policing. It's a horrible term. It's a circle within a circle. It's the nature of that will be that when new technology comes out, on the criminal side, we'll generally be playing catch up. Now, that can be done at speed, because it's generally little tweaks here and there, but we do tend to be slightly behind on that. But the wider part, I think you made the second part of it about bogus crime, where, yeah, that's again, you know, I remember as a community police sergeant in Lark Hall over in South Lanarkshire, we had a horrible, horrible spate of bogus criminals targeting the elderly, the vulnerable, and it was the impact that had on the community was awful. And one of them even used my name, so that was not a good thing to try and con their way into a house. But yeah, it's the devastating impact of that on people. You know, I frequently think that housebreaking it's a horrible crime, but unless you've been the victim of it or dealt with people who have been the victims of particularly horrific ones, it's one where you can't underestimate the impact that has, that somebody's come into the sanctity of your home, your private space, and stolen from you and rummaged around your personal belongings. It's really an intrusive crime, and one that we have absolutely zero tolerance for.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Councillor Goldie. So we're hearing that in Kilsyth, there are priorities around tackling antisocial behaviour, tackling, and particularly where that's fueled by drug and alcohol misuse. We're hearing that in areas that are that little bit closer to Greenbelt and the countryside, there's issues around sort of quad bike racing and the scrambler motorbikes racing. We know that housebreaking and the kind of bogus crime is common across all areas. Picking up on Andy's invitation to you, are there other local priorities that are unique to your area that you would want to take this opportunity to flag up, or do they fall in to the 4 categories that are in the current local policing priorities?
And those ones are getting wiped. We're starting with a blank sheet of paper as well. That's the important thing to note. They are helpful, and some of them may stay, but really the focus is on the left column there. You know, what's missing? We're 3 years down the line. Can you see anything there that's we need to look at? Are we, you know, one of the things that has come up or become more prevalent in certainly the public's line of sight in the last couple of years has been violence against women and girls. You know, what's your views on that? Do you think that's something that we should? Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that if it's not on that list, it's not getting done. But we need to pick some where we can say the community have spoken and said, these are the things that matter most to us. It doesn't mean the other stuff won't matter, but it just means if you had a spare 2 cops, where would you send them? Where would you tackle? And if it for me, it'd be one of the sort of top priority areas.
Can I just bring in a wee point that I want to make?
Yes.
Obviously, I work in Cumbernauld, right in the heart of the town centre, right next to Tesco. And also, I'm involved in other things. There are 2 things that I think are quite concerning. And physically, on a Sunday in particular, there seems to be big gatherings of cars, Andy, of the young ones having these meets. That seems to be the thing just now. Now, they're probably from all over, God knows where they come from, but you could maybe have 50 cars in our car park on a Sunday night, and that's about 200-300 young people. In another area that I'm involved in, and we're a small country, a lot of the stuff that's happening in our country should be getting focused on more, going into the thought processes and the avenues that the young people communicate with each other. These meets are all organised on their whatever. My granddaughters, just listening to them, and my granddaughters are quite high achievers. They've got lots of pals that are high achievers, but there's a lot of stuff goes on around them with others that they mix with. They went over to McDonald's on one night last week. One of my granddaughters is training to be a nurse, so she was on shifts, but her and her sister went out with another friend. The car park over at Starbucks, you couldn't get into it. Sunday night again, a lot of drugs are getting passed at these meets. And what's really concerning me is, and another bit of stuff that I'm involved in, the number of drug driving that's been what's the word? It's happening. The police are catching some of it. There's an issue, and I think there was a question in Parliament last week or the week before about the way some of the evidence was recorded or it went missing and there's a lot of people got off with not being charged on that charge because there was a fault in the processes that happened. So these massive meets, there's a lot of young people there, there's a lot of drugs passing hands there, there's people coming up from England dishing the drugs to our young people in North Lanarkshire, and that I think is a massive priority, not just now from the point of view of, oh, we know what's happening. That is where you are going to get a lot of young people that are going off the rails, damaging themselves with drugs, being killed in these cars, because that is a massive thing that's going to be happening. They're racing in these cars wherever they can get. And the one last thing that I want to bring up is the 2 quad bikes that were bought recently by the police. I think some of you are in this meeting, might have been at that meeting where there was a wee presentation there, Willie. Is there any feedback from the benefit that these quad bikes are bringing to dealing with the problem? Now, being based in the heart of Cumbernauld, Billy's will tell you, what's the word? The behaviour of some young people in broad daylight in the town centre. You'll know this, Willie and Billy. The town centre managers have been demented over the summer. We've had a lot of challenging behaviour over the summer with young people just walking into our building, which is an open community building, and being quite challenging. And these very local things are happening, and the police, you probably do have intelligence on all of this, but this is where a lot of the issues are stemming from. It's like a herd thing develops. You probably studied it in your police studies, but this is where they get the bravado, and then the next morning they don't go to their work because they've been out their faces at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I felt there was a wee reaction to the issue around drugs when Bill Craig was speaking, because the very liberal view that some people are taking to some drugs must be at the back of every police officer's mind when you're trying to deal with somebody that's drugged up, but you know that the offences are not being looked at as a serious social problem. It's just something that they do. That's all.
That's all, Mary. That's all.
Yes.
I'm kind of struggling to find something you haven't talked about.
I know.
I'll go through them sort of in the order that I scribbled them down there. So, road police and the car meets. The car meets, Lex is probably just about to go off camera because he's, you know, he had a huge issue with it at Buckenshaw.
Aye.
And, you know, the difficulty we have with the car meets, there's car meets that are organised, and these guys and girls, and it is mixed sex, they turn up and there's literally nothing wrong with their cars, because we send road policing up, they inspect them because they take pride in their cars, and they might not be expensive cars, but there's actually nothing wrong with them. That's the difficulty. That's very different from 6, 8, 10 cars blocking a Starbucks. They're two sort of different things.
Try 100 cars.
Aye. Well, Alex had 250, I think, at the most recent count, which was significant. But again, they went down there and there's no offences.
I find that hard to believe. Because I'm listening to my granddaughters and the pals, and you should hear what's going down.
Aye. Well, we've got cops underneath people's bonnets looking for stuff, and they're not finding it. But I take your point. If it's all organised online, that presents a challenge. If it's done in a private group, because where can I get authority to go into people's private messaging, their private communications, to say they're meeting up with cars that have never presented serious violence? That's a major issue for us, and you're right into the heart of you know, personal security and whatnot. Your drug driving one's a great point. You know, there's drugs in Lanarkshire. Is it an issue? Yes. Is drug-related deaths an issue in Lanarkshire? Yes, 100%. And there's a significant body of work going on about that. Drug driving, the the piece you spoke about at Parliament. Now, it's one of these offences that's, I'll not go into the specifics of it in any great depth, but certain offences are time barred. So if Graham and I pull somebody and they're done for drug driving, there's a certain period within which we have to report that, get it through, get it done, and get the lab work done on it. Since the legislation came out, we've had a significant number caught across Scotland. That, of course, goes to one lab, and in that lab, they've been struggling to get the stuff processed in sufficient time as to make the time bar. In some cases, you know, the vast majority are fine, but there have been some that have gone past the time bar. If it's past the time bar, we can't take action, and that is absolutely awful from our point of view. But there is nothing, you know, short of significant investment into the labs for this specific purpose, then there's very little we as police officers can do. We are going through a review just now in Lanarkshire, bizarrely, to make sure that everything we do about drug driving in terms of samples, evidence, is getting hammered through so that we can maximise the time that stuff's at the lab to give us the best possible chance of getting something done on that. Yeah, your drugs in general, couldn't support you more in your thoughts around about that. Antisocial behaviour, you know, a number of people tell me about antisocial behaviour. When I have the surgeries with the counsellors, they say the same. So they are sticking up for the wider community, saying we've got an issue with antisocial behaviour. But if I was to tell you that antisocial behaviour in North Lanarkshire is down over 25%, and that's a whole year versus the previous year, that's not just a week or two. It's and that was in COVID, where there should be none. It's lower now than it has been, but we're still talking about vast numbers. I mean, we're talking about over 20,000 incidents, so it is significant. Just because it's come down from what, 27? Yeah, 27 and a quarter. It's come down from 27,200 to 20,000, or just over 20,000, is still huge numbers, but it's going in the right direction because people have got the confidence to report it. And in talking about the quad bikes, they are making a significant impact across North Lanarkshire. You know, Lex's team, Graham's team, they're out there using them, and we're using them a lot to tackle antisocial behaviour, because when people are gathered in areas that are inaccessible to cars or would be seen a mile off on foot, they can scoot across, engage with them. Sometimes it's just kids just being too noisy. Other times there's other stuff going on, but we can get a quick response to it, so they're worth their weight in gold in that respect.
That's great.
Thanks, Andy.
But getting a wee
Oh, you're on mute.
sorry, maybe a wee bit of feedback to the community board about the quad bikes.
Okay, I'm sure we could do that. Folks, I've got a couple of questions, one from Billy Lees and one from Bill Craig. So can you just start to think about any final comments or suggestions that you might have, and we'll look to wind up the session tonight. Billy, can I come to you, Billy Lees?
Just a quick comment. I mean, you know, everything we seem to be talking about seems to be all doom and gloom, but we forget behind the scenes there's a lot that, you know, the police are doing, especially with ourselves in the PSYB. We've been in different areas in Cumbernauld putting alarms on elderly people's doors and windows, you know, which is a great thing for the elderly there. And it's something that we're funding, you know, for the police, and the police have been great with us, coming along with us, making sure the PSYB, the kids get in there along with us, you know, and fitting these alarms. These alarms are just stick on, very easy to fit. So it's great, and to see the faces of the elderly once you put them up is amazing. So we've got to think there's a lot of good things happening out there with the police. It's not all doom and gloom. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy. That's a lovely positive, and it's really good that it's young people working with older residents and older people households. Andy, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I was just going to thank Billy again for his work and his kind words, and it goes back to that thing we had on the screen earlier on. You have got, and I've worked in a lot of different places, as Graham has, it's you've got an exceptional workforce here, and it's not the three gaffers that are on this call, that's for sure. It's the young cops, the frontline cops that are really pushing the boat out and doing what's right by their communities. And then they have to inspire, along with the likes of Billy, to get these PSYV out. And I think it is fantastic that you do this thing where you bridge that gap between the generations, because the older generation have so much that they'll keep to themselves and have so much to pass on. And that is an avenue to do so through that PSYV and through our community cops groups.
Remember, Andy, that's including me as one of the elderly.
I wouldn't like to say.
And Bill from Kilsyth.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. I'd put on to the chat, Andy, that the Community Council in Kilsyth will pull together our comments and views on the new document and what we want, where we would see it going. And is there a, and we'll pass that to you for information and to use or not use. But is there a deadline when you would want that submitted?
I'm going to save you the bother of pulling together a document, Bill. On my very last slide, I'm going to show you a QR code that can be accessed from a mobile phone or whatever, and it goes straight into a survey.
All right.
And that's probably easier to just click some buttons online and put your comments there. Then we get them all from across Lanarkshire. It's my final slide. And if you don't have the code, what I'll do is once I come out this, I will put the code. I don't know how this would the link work in the chat bar, Jennifer?
The chat bar will disappear in 10 minutes.
Aye, that's what I was thinking. Right, okay, so we'll I'll speak to Matt, who's on the call, about getting that link out to everyone on this call, and you can pass it far and wide. And it's just the more people, we don't need big screeds and screeds information about this. It's very much a case of what's your priorities? Here's the 5 things we want you to look at. We don't need huge big explanations about it, because all this will be collated, and it's very much what do you want. If you'd 2 spare cops in a car somewhere in North Lanarkshire, what would the first thing you would want them to do to go to? It's that's the sort of questions we've got to, that's the reality.
I think the diagram that you had up, your local plan, your police plan on a page, partnership and prevention, your local priorities, these probably will come out to be very similar in your new plan, but it would be maybe having a page or so that would explain or maybe highlight, is a better word, that antisocial behaviour or drugs or alcohol or domestic abuse, maybe even some housebreaking or whatever, stems very much from how a lot of people live, what their living environment's like. That if they're living from a hand to foot on a daily basis, poverty, poor quality housing, all that has an influence on these individuals that are coming out of that house and into the community. And
you're right, that's a societal issue, and I'm sure there's 101 academic surveys
that's right.
would point to elements of that.
Yeah, it's maybe trying to show how these affect each other. That you can't just deal with the drug problem when you've got antisocial, when you've got housing problems or lack of money, poverty. People always find a source of comfort, whether it be alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs, or beating their partner up, or whatever. So we'll see. Look forward to seeing the draft.
Yeah.
Can I go to Alec and then Councillor Goldie and then Graham? And we'll finish up after Graham. So Alec Clark.
Thanks for that. I was just wanting to pick up Andy when he was talking about the drug driving limitations. Surely there is a mechanism within the police service to raise this with the Scottish judiciary and have that limitation extended.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way things work at the moment, it's not. Many cases are time barred because they believe there's sufficient time for that to be processed, analysed, and back. And we're not talking about vast amounts of numbers, and it is getting an improving picture. I think when the new legislation came out in this regard, and I think in a lot of it was how many, it was the proactivity of the police officers, particularly our local guys out in cars and our road policing colleagues have gone out and really hammered this because they recognise how impacted this would be and the dangers of it. And then before you know it, the labs overrun. That's a resourcing issue rather than a legislative issue. But I do take your point that there is an overlap there.
Yeah, well, you know that this limitation, etc., is going to change. It should be changed quickly.
Well,
that's all I would add to that.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Alec. And Councillor Goldie?
It's really just to follow up on the positivity that Billy had, and that the community teams do really good work, certainly within the Cumbernauld area. Just on getting information from community groups, and we've got 3 community councils operating in the Cumbernauld South area, none of whom are on tonight, and it's to see whether we could share stuff directly with the community councils to get that information to them and get their priorities. I don't know what kind of timescale we've got, but I'm assuming that the community board should have at least contact information by email for the community councils. It'd be useful to kind of take that forward a little bit. And just on that as well, it's the positivity of the guys appearing at community councils, and I know that isn't always possible, but even just communicating to the community councils before the meeting, the kind of local crime stats or any initiatives that are going on within the area would be very positive. It happens sometimes. I know the guys are under pressure. I know you've recently had a change of community officers, but just something to maintain the continuity of information coming to them. I know it's a tough job and your guys can be called from pillar to post, but it would be something that would be worthwhile.
Yeah, and we should be attending community boards. I mean, that's a fundamental part of community policing, and I'd love to say there's no excuse for not attending, but frequently if they're the only car available and they're out getting calls, then they're going to get dragged away from it, and they should be providing regular updates to the boards about initiatives, about this survey. So our method of gathering all the information is either like this or it's through this survey, the link to which I'll share with you, and would really welcome if you had the ability on the board. If you have contacts out in the other community boards, then please share it with them, because the more we get, the more we can analyse. And doing this online takes 10 minutes, and then we look for themes within that. And then the plan itself, to let you understand, the plan itself is relatively generic because it covers such a wide area. But we are, the theme in Kilsyth might be the same as the theme in Clydesdale. And we marry them up, we look at them, then we can put parameters in place and allow our community and our emergency response colleagues to implement things in that. And then it's myself and the divisional commander who have to go in front of the scrutiny board. Because see, once we write it down on a plan, we have to go and speak to it and say, here's what we've done. And they'll set the new plan will have, I must report on this at the third meeting of 2023 and so on. And it gives you a specific time when I have to go in front of it and make sure it's done. So there is real accountability.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Councillor Goldie. So you're happy for us to share the presentation and to circulate the survey as widely as we can?
Yes, please. Yeah, and
Great.
I'll email the bits over to you, Jennifer, as soon as I'm finished here, if you don't mind.
Perfect. That's fine. Thanks, Andy. And your colleague Graham's been waiting to come in, and then Matt.
I think I was just going to touch on that for the superintendency. I actually instructed one of their inspectors this afternoon to get in touch and get that kind of QR code circulated throughout the kind of the community boards, partners, and again with that encouragement to share it. So you might find it actually pops into your mailbox. It might have done today, or if not, over the next couple of days. That's certainly for kind of Coatbridge, Airdrie, Cumbernauld kind of areas. So, but I will ask them to dig out any kind of email addresses you have for the community councils as well. And get tied in with there. Now, my signal went there, so again, was that a kind of a bit of feedback around about kind of perhaps not always that present?
Yeah, yes, Graham. Yeah, there was a bit, what I'd said was, we try our very best to get there, and we should get there. It's a core part of community policing, is to be there, engage with the community, and take questions and to feed back on initiatives. But sometimes it's just not possible, because if there's an ongoing live incident, you have to go to those in need.
Indeed, indeed. I think we appreciate that for sure. Matt, did you want to come in?
Very briefly, Jennifer, just to highlight, we will share with over 500 contacts on our community boards, and we'll make sure that everything's shared across there. We'll also put any information on our MyTown Twitter and Facebook pages as well, which is something that's got quite a lot of followers on that. So we'll do that as a matter of course for promoting the survey going forward.
And thank you for that, Matt.
That's excellent. Thanks very much indeed, Matt. Folks, it's just after 8 o'clock. There is a final comment from Sharon in the chat bar about the importance of partnership working and tackling antisocial behaviour through that joined up approach. And I think we've seen that in evidence here tonight. If there are no final comments, can I just...
Sorry, Jennifer.
On you go.
I've just got to go through a wee thing on there, and it's 2 slides if I can get them working this time. So the first one is really, hopefully you'll see that. What's our next steps? I always promise you the next steps. So our piece on this is one consultation exercise. I've met with internally as well. We have to consult. I've consulted with the Scottish Police Federation already. I'll be doing a similar exercise with South Lanarkshire colleagues, and we'll be pushing things out. And then from that, we get all the data in, and then we analyse it and look for those big themes. And then we have to consider how we're going to approach those themes and how we're going to be held accountable for them. And then we draft the document. There's a little bit of fine tuning around about that, because nobody's perfect, clearly. And then we have to present that to the scrutiny boards for North and South Lanarkshire. If they don't sign it off, it doesn't go ahead. It's that simple. And so there is real governance round about that. And then finally, if any of our tech savvy colleagues on here, you can get your mobile phone out. If you were to put it into camera and hover over that QR code that's there, it will take you directly to a survey on policing. And that's the survey we're going to be using. But for those that would prefer just to click the link on the internet, then I will make sure that both the QR code and the link is sent across to Matt on completion of tonight. And yeah, as it says at the top of the page there, thank you so much for your comments. I'll now hand you back to Jennifer for any closing remarks.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm going to give everyone a few minutes just in case you want to try taking a shot of that on your mobile phones. Okay. So everyone, can I first of all, on your behalf, thank Andy and Graham and Lex very much indeed for the session tonight. I've found it really informative. I'm sure you all have as well. And tonight is only the beginning. As Andy says, there is opportunity for further engagement through completing that survey, through discussing the local police plan within your own community organisations, within the community boards. The timeline that we're looking at is the plan being approved in the early new year, and you can correct me if I'm wrong there, Andy. It will come to the Community Planning Partnership Board in February, and then, as Andy says, it must go to the Community Safety Partnership Forum for signed off. So we have got a bit of time over the next couple of months to really think about the local policing issues that we would want to see reflected in that plan. So big thank you again to Andy, Graham and Lex. Can I thank all of you as well very much indeed for making the time available tonight and coming on the call and contributing. Lex, is that your hand up?
Sorry, that was a wee mistake as I was flashing past it.
You're just getting fair touralt with this technology. And can I also express thanks to Matt and Leanne, who do a fantastic job behind the scenes making these meetings happen and dealing with all the technical stuff and inviting all the community organisations and community boards. So big thank you to Matt and Leanne. And again, if you have any queries, don't hesitate to get in touch with us, and we will send out the presentation from tonight and the link to that survey. So thanks very much indeed, folks, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.